We'll start by reciting the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer once.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness.
So on page 2, let's say that you started a meditation session of half an hour or something. And so the first thing you did was you sat down and you reviewed the four thoughts that turn the mind, contemplating them. If you want, you can just recite them, but to ponder them a little bit, kind of mull them over in your mind, look at them and look at your relationship with them, not even necessarily with any particular planned outcome or thought for benefit or lack thereof. It's just like you familiarize yourself with it. And then you moved on to the practice of calm abiding. Following your breaths, exhalations and inhalations 21 times. Between the four thoughts that turn the mind and the 21 breaths, This is the way that we step out of all of our other activities and establish the mind in a place where it's fit for the practice. And then we have that wonderful line from Thupten Jinpa where he says, "This, the Master said, has the benefit of allowing the moisture of tranquil abiding," calm abiding, tranquil is nice, tranquil abiding, "to give birth to the shoots of realization." Now you'll notice, and I think he's careful about this, he doesn't say that realization comes from this sitting down and doing the calm abiding practice. He says that the benefit of that practice is the way in which we allow the moisture, and often this phrase is accompanied with warm moisture, which in many of the practices in the Vajrayana, like moist and warm is associated with life, like that's kind of a life situation. So then he says the initial, that this allows for the shoots to arrive, to grow, shoots of realization. And the piece that's important here, maybe more important than any other part, is your growing ability to rest physically and to rest the mind in calm abiding or tranquil abiding. And to, while the mind is resting, to notice, he goes so far as to say enumerate. If it takes that much energy, you should do that much, but you enumerate the various experiences that arise, the phenomenon that are inner. We experience some phenomena as inner, like I feel happy today or sad today, and other phenomena we feel as external. Could be an itch on the body or a pain of some kind. Or I look around the room and I see all of you sitting here, and that also is something to note. So rather than during the meditation being involved in something other than the practice becomes noting and enumerating, not in a list, but just noticing, like this is happening. When we notice that something's happening, it's easier for us to let go of it. Especially if we didn't invite it and didn't particularly want it. Then it's very easy to let go of, relatively speaking. We're more likely to let go of it if we actually notice that it's there. So the noting the phenomenon as they arise, is a piece of the practice. You get good at that, you find that little irritations at things during the day just kind of come up and just on their own, they're just gone. There's nothing to be done. So we want to nurture that. So he concludes, this the Master said has the benefit of allowing the moisture of tranquil abiding to give birth to the shoots of realization. And then we move on to the next one. Next, the initial meditation on the absence of intrinsic existence of perceived objects is presented in the following line. Now understand, when we move into these places, the previous one, and the previous one, and the preliminaries. Okay, good enough. I keep losing my place here. Okay. Now we move into, this is really here talking about the ultimate mind, as he was referencing earlier, and the aphorism or the point, train to view all phenomena as dreamlike. Now this is a particularly important one, because this is actually where we encounter the ultimate nature of mind meeting the ordinary or the relative nature of mind. And we encounter this aspect, where both of these, in order to understand them, we often divide them into two pieces. You have the mind, which we all understand, which we would call the relative mind. It gets angry and irritated, it gets hungry, it does things that are skillful and not skillful, it has regrets, and all of the things that we can associate with our own mind. This is the relative mind. And not precisely in opposition to that, we have the ultimate mind. I think one of the most helpful things to understand about the dichotomy between relative mind and ultimate mind is that actually the relative mind arises from the ultimate mind. There would be no relative mind without the ultimate mind. So at the very least, that puts the relative mind in a position that is of equal importance to the ultimate mind. It's not something to brush aside, because it's the seat of all of our experiences. It is not the source of all the experiences, but it's the seat of it. So from the ultimate mind, all relative phenomena appear. We never see the ultimate mind. It has no shape or form, location, any of these things. You can't see it ever. You can't hear it. It doesn't speak. There's nothing there to perceive. But from that ultimate mind, all phenomena emanate endlessly. Whether they're pleasant or unpleasant is another issue. So, in the aphorism, we have, this the Master said has the benefit of allowing the moisture of tranquil abiding to give birth to the shoots of realization. So that's our tranquil abiding, calm abiding. Next, the initial meditation on the absence of intrinsic existence of perceived objects is presented in the following line. So this now is not a philosophical statement. We've moved from what might be considered like, well, first cut is a conceptual understanding. We now are moving into a different place. Trained to view all phenomena as dreamlike is not a philosophical proposition, but a method by which we can come face to face with the ultimate nature of mind. The initial meditation on the absence of intrinsic existence of perceived objects. Let's ask the question for a moment. What is intrinsic existence? Why would we bother to say absence of intrinsic existence? First, we have to know what we mean by intrinsic existence. If I hold up this piece of paper, would we say that it intrinsically exists?
No.
And what do we mean by that? Kimberly, you nodded your head.
I did.
You must have fallen asleep momentarily. Huh?
That's correct.
What, then you fell asleep?
No, I did not fall asleep.
Is that part of impermanence?
Speak up, yep.
Impermanence?
Well, if it intrinsically existed, would it be impermanent?
No.
No, yeah. What if we have
Yes? Think.
Say that again. If it
Gener-
intrinsically existed, then it wouldn't be
That's right. If it intrinsically existed, it would not be impermanent. So how many things intrinsically exist? Not so many. Can we find one? Chickens. Go on.
Chickens don't.
I think Kay is right. I mean, it should be really clear to us. There shouldn't be any doubt about this, philosophically or experientially. We cannot find anything which intrinsically exists, which does not come and go. It just intrinsically exists.
It just doesn't intrinsically exist.
What?
It just doesn't intrinsically
I can't quite hear
She
you.
said it just doesn't intrinsically exist.
Oh, I see. Just doesn't. Oh, that's interesting. That would kind of imply that there is something that intrinsically exists, but this piece of paper isn't one of them.
What would it mean to say that it intrinsically appears?
Wow. Intrinsically appears.
But maybe not intrinsically.
You mean it appears without causes and conditions?
No, that's what I mean, not necessarily intrinsically, but it does appear.
Oh, I see. Well, if you say not necessarily intrinsically, I'm okay with it.
Difference.
Because my mind says, hey, he's just fooling. It's not real.
How about how about space?
How about space?
Well, when you say, can one think of anything that intrinsically exists that is not conditioned? Is space?
Conditioned? Is space conditioned? And if I said yes, then what would you say?
Say, how do you know?
Well, I'm not going to say yes.
Oh
So
boy.
there.
Well, you wouldn't know that space exists if you didn't have something in it, right?
Space is the concept we have for
Yeah.
distance between other phenomena. So if the other phenomena don't intrinsically exist, then space doesn't exist either.
Well, that's an interesting proposition. But I think what we actually need to do here is step out of the conceptual understanding and trying to find what it is that's conceptual. It's intriguing to go there and sometimes even highly entertaining. But I think in the very beginning we're on the money when we said this does not intrinsically exist. If it intrinsically existed, it means that it is not impermanent. At the very least, it means that. But actually, it might mean a lot more. Or a lot less, you know.
What about Buddha nature?
Buddha nature. So now we have a number of things that fall into an interesting category. Does Buddha nature exist?
Say so.
Well, it's a gnarly one, I think, philosophically, for Buddhist philosophers and all for a long time. Like, what can you say about the nature of mind when the nature of mind is the seat of all experiences, without exception? So that's taken to be pretty much ground zero, like that's the truth. So if that's the case, then it gets a little bit difficult to talk about things that look like they exist, which is why I think as Buddhists we tend to step out of that, because I don't know anyone who's gone far enough down that rabbit hole before they gained enough weight and they couldn't get back out again. It's just, once you start on the conceptual thing and putting the pieces together, it gets very complicated. And I think that we can also, in the process of that, though I don't object to it, I think it's good to follow those things and work them, but I think it gets to a place where we actually don't know what we're looking at anymore. That we were more clear when we asked the question, does Buddha nature exist? Usually, when we say something exists, we mean that we can see it, we can measure it, we can have some aspect of it that we might feel that would lead us to have confidence that there is something there. But in this case, I think the more interesting thing is, and the more thing that's in accord with what Thupten Jinpa is talking about here, is what about that mind? What about the mind? And he says, has the benefit of allowing the moisture of tranquil abiding to give birth to shoots of realization. We're talking about experience. We're not talking about something that is necessarily measurable in any ordinary way that we might call it measurable. But we're also mainly talking just about experience. And when he says, relate to these phenomena in a gradual manner, but again, simultaneous engagement, right? So you're relating to the things that arise during the meditation, but not in the way of engaging in the normal way that we think of engaging, but just engaging in the way of enumerating as softly and lightly as you can. Like the least touch possible to just let yourself know this is just phenomena going by. So then we come to the next, the dreamlike one, trained to view all phenomena as dreamlike. Let's read what he says. This entire world of the external environment and the beings within it, the entire world and the external environment and the beings within it, which are by nature mere appearances, are nothing but apparitions of your own deluded mind. Now, when you read that, you may or may not have that experience. In fact, it could be an irritating proposition that you might want to say, like, show me how that is. Prove that to me that that's what it is. Because it's very clear, it's a fairly strong proposition that we may have a sense of connection with and we may not, but it actually doesn't yet address the issue of why would I believe that or think that at all? Because if that were true, that would mean a lot to me. Mm-hmm. Thus, not even a single atom exists, he says, with a reality separate from the mind. Mm-hmm. Not even a single atom exists with a reality separate from the mind. And then he says, when you examine, thus, you will come to realize that even on the conventional level, that is our kind of ordinary relative mind level, no referent of your cognition is established as possessing substantially true existence. It's a mouthful. Maybe we can skip lunch. So the next paragraph continues with this. So let's finish that. This entire world of the external environment and the beings within it, which are by nature mere appearances. So he's saying, like, basically everything is a mere appearance, are nothing but apparitions of your own deluded mind. Thus, not even a single atom exists. I think we already read this one, didn't we?
Yes.
Oh, I'm back on 2. I want to go to 3.
Well, it's a duplicate
The
paragraph.
paragraph is
Stay
in
on
there
page
twice.
Oh, it is?
two.
The
Stay on
paragraph
page
is in there
2.
twice in a row.
But this is
Oh.
just the same paragraph twice.
Oh, you're right.
Twice, so
Blame the
stay-
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody got
important to say
overzealous.
Where's Juan when we need him?
We can blame that guy.
It's so extra.
That's not extra. I'm surprised by that.
It's just an extra statement.
Yeah.
Important enough to say.
Anyway, the joke is particularly associated with the mind training. So if you get the joke, you know you're a real mind training person. And if you don't, talk to Tim on the break. Okay, so the second paragraph is the one I read first. Contra possessing something true. So nothing basically possesses substantially true existence. Contemplate in this manner. Next, so contemplate in this manner. Do you know what that means? Contemplate in this manner. This is very important, actually. We all, given our culture and our education and the fact that we've grown up and studied and done so many things that required a lot of conceptual work, it's easy to come to this and conceptually contemplate it, conceptually kind of understand it. And that's important. We call that the first wisdom. You just study it. Study what Thupten Jinpa said. You look at it close, like, what is really being said here exactly? Well, what is being said, to put it in the most humorous, but perhaps the most accurate terms possible, you're crazy. I mean, what could be more clear than to say you live in a world of delusion? It all appears in your deluded mind. So we don't have to believe that just because somebody said it, but in this case we want to understand what is being said here. And the way that I relate to it, and maybe some creative discussion could be relevant too, the way that I relate to it is, I look at my experiences. If I do that when I'm meditating, and I look at my experiences, I have this sense of, you're crazy. Look what's going on. It's like all these things are happening. Likes and dislikes, attachments and aversions, plans for the future, regrets about the past. It's like the tide rolls in just every few minutes, and it always brings a whole new batch of dead fish. And they are, really. It's just flotsam and jetsam floating by. It's not even alive. It even stinks. And so, to contemplate this is to be involved in the simultaneous engagement, where we are happy to have the tide roll in, and to have the sense even of the smell of the salt and decaying flesh and things, and at the same time to understand this is a mental phenomenon. It's nothing else. When we're angry in the post office that they're so slow, everything changes in the moment that we think to ourselves in a flash, this is a mental phenomenon. This is not even really a post office. This is a dream state, like a dream state. What happens in a dream? You fall asleep in the dream. If you've never had this experience, you got to see somebody. You fall asleep in the dream, and while you're in the dream, you have real relationships with people. Some of them are people that you knew outside the dream. Some of them are in the dream, and sometimes you talk to them and have what would be considered like very ordinary conversation and relationship. And other times, they're kind of weird. Like you end up flying, or they end up turning into an animal, or some other thing happens. But in the moment of the dream, it never occurs to you that that's a dream. That happens when you wake up. And it may happen if you wake up in the dream and are still in the dream. Most people don't have that experience very often, nor do they, when they have it, nor do they recognize the profundity of that insight. That you just had a whole, sometimes a whole life in a dream that occurred somewhere between seconds and minutes, but in your mind it was years going by. And we wake up and we realize that's what happened. We say, oh, it's just a dream. Like, that's nothing? That seems to me like a really big thing. That's, to have your whole world go on in the night and all these things, and then you wake up and you just say, huh, a dream, and go about your business. Wait a minute here. Simultaneous engagement is so critical that we can look at all of those things that are arising. We're not dreaming yet, let's say. We're not dreaming. We're just witnessing the plethora of experiences arising and floating away in the tide coming and going of our experience all the time. And when we practice shamatha, we normally consider this is a profound hindrance to our meditation. It's a distraction. I'm watching the dead fish come in on the tide and kind of having this relationship with it, and it's a distraction. And then I think, oh, this is not what I'm doing. I'm supposed to be meditating. But actually, that is like a dream occurring while you're awake, which we have all the time. They're always going on. So, is it something substantial? Is it impermanent? Does it inherently exist? Well, let's take the easy route. Can we not just easily say, a phenomena that arises momentarily during my meditation does not inherently exist? That defies the meaning of inherent or intrinsic. The mind that experiences may have an intrinsic existence. We might try that one on, but we know that it doesn't inherently exist, those experiences. The experiences come and go. So when he says, train to view all phenomena as dreamlike, he's not saying, turn the belief system on and believe that you are a dream. He's not saying that. Or try to imagine that everything is a dream. That's closer, but not quite there. We're not trying to put a label onto the dream that basically treats it as intrinsic. Oh, that was a dream about my mother. She's been dead for 30 years, That was a dream. If it is a dream, if we go that far, where is it? Where did it go? What happened? It's just not there. Was it ever really there? This paper looks like it's really here. So this paper, we could think of, it intrinsically exists. Though with a little bit of consideration, conceptual consideration, we very quickly come to the place of, nope, doesn't exist. Not inherently, not intrinsically. So generally speaking, philosophically, when we're talking about how things exist or don't exist, the word exist is often specifically looking for intrinsic existence. Intrinsic existence is, this piece of paper has always existed, just as you see it, always will. Somebody once pointed out to me, because we're all sort of, we are almost genetically all scientists in this culture, really close to it. So the thing that was pointed out was that if this paper intrinsically exists, you would not be able to experience it. Because we experience things through change. If it never changed, light would not reflect off of it, which changes the paper. Like all the things that bring about experience wouldn't happen. So just from an experience, conceptual perspective, we can come to the rather, I would say, bothersome conclusion that that nothing actually is an icon of existence, and intrinsic existence doesn't exist. So when he says train to view all phenomena as dreamlike, what he's really saying is train to have the sense that every experience that we have is a passing ephemera. It's not actually what it appears to be. But there's nothing wrong with that as long as we notice it for what it is. So that's the simultaneous engagement. We have to notice the experience as it comes and goes. Otherwise, we don't have, there's no insight to be had. Can't come. So he says, train to view all phenomena as dreamlike. This entire world of the external environment and the beings within it. Did I already do this one?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the other one. Next, the meditation on the absence of the intrinsic existence. Now I'm suspicious. Am I reading the same thing over?
No.
Does it
So
exist?
that's good.
It's still here. It must intrinsically exist. Next, the meditation on the absence of the intrinsic existence of perceiving subjects, right? Is presented in the following line. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. So now this one goes way down deep. Let's read the next paragraph. Contemplate thus, similar to the preceding meditation, where we had simultaneous engagement, recall, the very mind that negated the intrinsic existence of the perceived objects, one, in terms of its past, is no more. So this is a conceptual, kind of scholarly approach to it. But as many threads as you can weave into it is okay. It's good. So the very mind that negated the intrinsic existence of the perceived objects, like this piece of paper, the mind that negated this as an intrinsically existing thing, in terms of its past, no more. The past is gone. In terms of its future, yet to be. And in terms of its present, is composed of three parts. I always like that, like, what? What happened? It's devoid of color, shape, and spatial location. So that's part of the instructions into insight meditation. Everything we experience is devoid of color, spatial location, and shape. It cannot be said to be located in a specific point of the body. When analyzed, it is empty of all identifiable characteristics. The perceiving, where do I have to go? Three. What's missing?
It's the bottom of page 2. There's one more line. And then the perceiving. There's 2. Page 2. Right there. The perceiving.
Oh, I see. Okay. It cannot be said to be located in a specific point of the body. When analyzed, it's empty of all identifiable characteristics. In other words, no shape, size, color. The perceiving mind, too, abides as primordially unborn. So, in the process, we step down through some stages here that we need to look at and contemplate regularly. That we enumerate the experiences which arise during the meditation. That's good. So we are aware of what we have experienced, and we haven't made them into something that they're not. On the other hand, the next step also is required, which is to step down deep into the mind that we experience also. So we do experience something that we would generally call my mind or the mind. We have that experience. We actually want to change that experience a little bit. And we do that by, again, continually, simultaneously noticing the things that arise in that mind. So that little by little, the mind itself becomes an issue where it becomes more and more easy to say about that mind that it also does not have intrinsic existence. So we might ask the question, so what existence does it have? And my sense of that is that there isn't any answer to that. There isn't any existence that it has apart from the experience itself.
So Lama, would you say it's co-emergent with the experience?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I might change my mind later.
Okay.
Did you say the first one that you said where you said it exists as only in the experience? Is that what you said?
I think my sense is it's important to be careful about the speech that we use, whether our understanding will be shaped by our experience, which is shaped by the words we use to describe the experience. So I wouldn't say what you just said. What did you just say?
I asked you first. What did you just say?
See me in my office.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, never mind. See, that's what I mean. Never mind.
No mind.
I wrote it down. You said perceiving mind has no existence apart from experience itself.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Perceiving mind is we don't generally say that it has any existence apart from the experiences. The experiences are the manifestation of the mind. In fact, from a higher order, we could say that all of the experiences are a manifestation from the ultimate mind. And when those experiences appear to us, we normally bring them into a sense of relative understanding of the experience. Mm-hmm. But it's which again, there's nothing wrong with that also. But there's also nothing wrong with being confused in one way. So it's best to be very careful about the language, and rather than modifying the language to fix our understanding, instead of that, put your attention on what you understand from the experience itself. The words are never going to clarify that continually, because they're part of that tide coming and going with the fishies. They are part of that tide coming and going. So you have to be careful that the one describing it is also not falling into that very place themselves. It's hard not to. So I think partly it's nice to have these discussions, partly because people get a common sense of what's happening. And of course, we screw that common sense up. We misshape it, we apply new terms to it that feel to us like, well, that's an insightful term. And then later we realize, no, actually, it includes this other thing that isn't really quite right. And then because there's enough people who are in the conversation and looking at these things and engaging in the practice, then we have a sense of the sangha around it. Talk to each other and explore those things. Okay, we have one thing left here, right?
Well, page 3. Page 3.
In the bottom. Oh, no.
Page 3.
Oh, we had
Yeah.
Mama
Third
Michael?
day.
Yeah. Yes.
Question. We have a dangling sentence,
A dangling what?
dangling phrase or sentence at the end of that last one, which is
Which page?
Top of 3.
bottom of 2.
Bottom of 2, top of 3.
It says the perceiving mind too abides as primordially unborn, so we didn't really go into the unborn nature.
Okay,
or even primordially.
receiving mind too abides as primordially unborn. Yeah, it means it never,
It's a
that,
fourth condition. It seems like it's a fourth condition of these three
what?
prior conditions, which are,
No, no, I don't think so.
okay.
That, I mean, maybe you're right about that, but I think it's complete the way that it is. We often use the phrase about mind itself as that being really the esoteric or ultimate mind is mind itself. And mind itself has never come into being, which is why we say unborn, and it never leaves. It's undying. So it's there before we are born as humans or snakes or whatever else is there, or dead fish. And it's there afterwards. It always was there. But we don't even say that, because that's getting sloppy again. What is not sloppy is to say that mind itself is unborn and undying. And anything that you add to that may give you the sense of knowing it better, but probably actually we're moving off the main spot. You don't want to have too many keys to the same door, or someone will find it and steal your mind. Remember, something will happen there. And so we understand that we also don't say mind is permanent, which you could easily just kind of, from a linguistic standpoint, you could say, what's the difference between permanent and unborn, undying? On the surface of things, you could say, linguistically, it looks like that seems okay. Same thing, they're synonymous. But from a spiritual perspective, to understand what it is we're trying to get at here, they're not the same. Things that we say are impermanent are not unborn, undying. They change. Impermanent here means that there's an interconnectedness that drives a more or less continuous change. But we don't say that the mind changes. We say it's unborn, undying. We don't say that it doesn't change by virtue of that either. So I think that over the millennia of discussing the business about the mind, it seems clear to me that we've come to a few very simple, clear formulas for how to reference that without saying any more than what we want to say. But in order for that to be clear to everybody has to have the same understanding of what that short phrase means. Okay? We have a little more here, don't we? We have lots of time. That's good. So, appearance is substantially true in the matter. Okay, next the meditation on the absence of the. Wait a minute. Oh, I really.
Page 3.
I really confused myself with this, didn't I? Okay.
We haven't done that.
Okay. Are we at the top of page 3?
Yes.
Top of 3.
Meditation on the absence of intrinsic existence of phenomena is presented in this line. And we've pretty much talked about that already. The remedy. So, when we're meditating, we often come to the place of becoming confused in the meditation. We're find ourselves thinking about political matters or about lunch or this or that, all sorts of things. And if we're engaging in the meditation, we will, generally speaking, apply a remedy to that, to move away from the distraction and move back into the meditation. That's normal. However, we also find, as we have been looking at, that we are simultaneously engaging in the way of noting all the experiences that arise to us and come through without playing with them. We just notice the appearance, and then they're gone. So that is all captured in the point. The remedy too is freed in its own place. Thus the very mind that applies the remedies through seeing the emptiness of all phenomena, including your body and mind, is not established. So the mind itself cannot be established as intrinsically existing. In general, all objects of knowledge can be said to be either objects or minds, depending on what your particular brand of confusion is really what we're talking about. If you start talking about the objects, then that's a confused state. But on the other hand, it is what most people do. So you can think of it as an object or a mind, but you can also just let that go. The important thing here is that rather than fixing the distractions that arise, which is what we ordinarily do, we fix the distractions, right? We turn our awareness somewhere else. We don't actually relate to it. It's an antidote to the distraction, to just let it go. And here what he's saying is, the remedy too is freed in its own space. So when you just let go of the remedies, the remedy too is freed in its own space. The remedy itself is an issue. When you say, I'm distracted, I need to get rid of that distraction, that's a remedy. Well, the most profound remedy is, you don't get rid of anything, you just let go of it. Thus, the very mind that applies the remedies, through seeing the emptiness of all phenomena, including your body and mind, is not established. In other words, the remedy too is freed in its own place. In general, all objects of knowledge can be said to be either objects or minds. Furthermore, since we have already examined the mind in its general form to be devoid of intrinsic existence, you should think certainly nothing is established primordially as substantially real. Not the distraction, not the meditation, not the mind that is distracted, nor the mind that meditates. None of them have been established as intrinsically existing, or even same as substantially real. Free the mind of conceptualization in this manner. So this is a pithy meditation instruction. And release it in this state of non-grasping at intrinsic nature in terms of any of the three times, past, present, and future. Focus the mind with ease, lucidity, and vibrancy, not allowing it to fall under the influence of either dullness or excitation. So this is where you can land if you can remain there without applying an antidote. So there's nothing wrong with applying an antidote. He's talking here about another level of engagement than what we ordinarily engage in. Like, I bypass the antidote by letting go of it, not by turning my mind somewhere else or doing anything particular about it. This is presented in the next line. Place your mind on the basis of all, the actual path. Continuing here, we'll be done in a moment. Identify the ordinary mind and place it in the state of free negation or affirmation. So this is again just letting go of the remedy. And you're left then with the experience without the distraction. Since all seven consciousnesses, I want to skip this paragraph, is the truth, because we're not looking at either the 6 or the 7 or the 8th consciousness today. That's another subject. I think we can drop down to, in the intervals, be a conjurer of illusions, down on the bottom left. It's titled, How to Train and the Subsequent Practices. It's presented in the following. In the intervals, be a conjurer of illusions. The subsequent periods that is following the meditation. The subsequent periods must be cultivated without losing the flavor of your meditative equipoise. So the meditative equipoise is kind of home base. Like, as long as you're there, you can investigate these things and go deeper. If you're not there, you won't be able to do that. So that the meditative equipoise, while it is nowhere near the end state, it's an absolute critical piece of the puzzle to be able to drop into that place. Therefore, even though perceptions of self and others, the external environment and the beings within it, what is this?
And so on.
Oh, you got it, okay.
What is it? So,
It's a typo, forget it.
A test.
Yeah, it's a test.
This is mind training.
so on.
This is why we shouldn't have midnights. They don't exist anyway.
So on seems like a good bet. So on.
Yeah, I think it's so on.
Okay, and so on. So they arise. It is your delusion that causes non-existing things to appear as existing. It's a little judgmental, but maybe okay. Contemplating such things as indistinguishable from illusory horses and elephants. This metaphor is actually kind of common in the tradition. Illusory animals and things that are not really there in the context of meditation. Contemplating such things as indistinguishable from illusory horses and elephants, relinquish clinging to the substantial reality. Now, really what he means to say there is to the experience of a substantial reality. Let go of even the experience of a substantial reality. In other words, you're not trying to change your experience into something that you perceive as an illusion. Just let go of it. Leave it like it is. Although you perceive yourself in terms of the five aggregates, which are the aggregates that comprise our bodies and minds and experience, although you perceive yourself in terms of your five aggregates, you are but an appearance of the mere aggregation of dependently originated things. So we all know what dependently originated means? Right? Okay. Apart from this, no self possesses a permanent and unitary nature. In other words, we have the experience of a fairly solid sense of who we are. We feel it in our bodies. We feel it in our sense of who we identify with. We feel it in our experience of the world. And each one of those is sensed often as a kind of permanent and unitary thing, a thing separate from other things. Apart from this, no self possesses a permanent and unitary nature. Contemplate and see yourself as an illusory person who comes and goes and interacts with objects. Now, I finished it there. It actually seemed to me like we were going a little bit too far, more than what we needed to do there. I think our time is up, and I want to close the teaching and discussion on this with just the simple. Oh, wait a minute, we didn't finish up with the conjure of illusions? Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
When you engage in the 7-point mind training, whatever stage or level you're at, and I think that there are many descriptions, when you engage in it, it's important to focus on the experience. Always important to focus on the experience. So the simultaneous engagement with the effort to engage in the practice and your understanding of what you need to do and trying to do that, all of these things need to be also engaged at the level of just noting the richness of your experience. Always. The distractions coming and going, it's like boiling water. It's always things coming up and going back down. And if you work with this sufficiently, you can discover that while you used to feel like all of these appearances that came while you were trying to meditate, and that therefore they were some kind of a hindrance, that actually they're the very substance of the meditation. It is the expression of the nature of mind, all of those things. They are not a hindrance. The hindrance is when we think it's a hindrance. Now we have something we have to look at. Before that, it was just something going by. And note, of course, that when it was an ice cream sundae, you didn't call it a hindrance. So, the experience of our ability to place our awareness on the experience as it comes and goes is critical. So let's recite the dedication prayer. Simple one in the middle of the page. Oh, by this
virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you for all coming. It was,
Can I make one announcement?
Yeah.
oh yeah.
We need 2 or 3 able-bodied people to help us move some objects out to Adele's van. So if you're willing to do that, please.
Do they have to be real?
Substantial.
The object
Substantial. We need 2 or 3 substantial bodies.
We could also use a couple people to help